All right, Mark, back on the channel again. Good to see you after your first appearance a couple of weeks ago. The viewers want you back, so you are here by popular demand. And we're going to have a chat. Maybe this can be, a fairly regular stint here, which is what some people suggested. I think you wouldn't mind that. And we'll just talk about what's been happening in Spain, because we're both living here, me in Madrid, you living down there in the south of the country. So we'll get two different perspectives of what's been going on. And so how are you today?
I'm good, mate. It's a lovely day here. You like the weather update? It's blue skies and sun. So
well, it hasn't been that way for the last week or so. Malaga has been one of these areas in Spain. I don't know whether it's your part of Malaga, because you're in Fuengirola, I think.
Yeah.
But some parts of Malaga have been smashed by flooding. Obviously not to the extent of Valencia a couple of weeks ago, of course, but the warnings went off.
Yes, it was a kind of bizarre one here. As I said in my previous appearance on your channel, I've lived here for 22 years, so I see my fair share of end of the world type rain. I've even been an Englishman, a country where it's very wet. I've never seen rain like I've seen here. It literally, and when you talk about Valencia and the rain they had there, I can relate to that, because I've seen end of days type rain here.
Yeah, because we're talking about two different climates as well, though, aren't we? Because we're talking about, for example, even in the north of Spain, somebody mentioned this yesterday, more similar to the UK type of weather, where it might rain consistently or persistently, as they say, for days on end, to the extent where the rivers can build up and overflow, whatever. But it's not that torrential downpour, which, as you said, you get the feeling that the world's going to end, right?
It is. It's quite incredible. I mean, you can have a downpour here for half an hour, then literally 40 minutes afterwards, it's blue skies and sun again.
Yeah.
I mean, the 4 seasons in a day kind of applies to that sometimes. I mean, this recent one was a strange one. Of course, it's very sad what's happened in Valencia, and it's awful to see those images on the news and whatever. But it's, I personally, my opinion, and based from where I live, it was a little bit a storm in a teacup, which sounds awful, because certain areas here were hit, but they tend to always get hit. I mean, when it rains, it literally does rain. I mean, an hour rain here sometimes would be equivalent to half a day's rain, and the infrastructure just can't cope with it. The drains overflow. It's a normal practice.
Yeah.
Parts of where I live in Fuengirola, you have a dry riverbed, which obviously isn't a dry riverbed when it rains, because those rivers are there for a reason. Yeah. Obviously to draw the water to the sea, but they're in some places they have areas where the cars drive over them. So you can imagine, as soon as the water comes down those rivers, it just flows off into the various roads.
Well, my experience with Malaga, and those are common all along the Malaga coast, that you have these dry ravines or dry riverbeds, as you call them, that come down from the mountains, because the characteristic of Malaga is that you have the highlands behind and then you've got the flatlands down below. And I think that's similar in many coastal parts of Spain.
Definitely.
But the thing is that those rivers can sit dry for 10 years. Which is what I've seen in Malaga, or just the trickle, and then all of a sudden, I remember in a place called Rincón de la Victoria, which is on the other side from where you are. The whole town flooded out because they'd built those those boardwalks, or what they call the Paseo Marítimo, and that blocked off some of the way to get the water out. People had built those chiringuitos, or those restaurants there, because they're popular places in the summer. So when it does pour in the mountains, people may be not aware down below of the rain hitting their way, which is what's been happening.
And we have a river close to us called Rio Seco, which obviously means dry river in Spanish. So that kind of illustrates your point there. But the strange thing here is, I mean, I give my local town hall some credit, because I was walking, as a retired person tends to do, and I was going to go down this little kind of route they've created, which is by a dry river. And I couldn't go down there because they were clearing it and wiring up all the rocks and things like that in anticipation of the floods, which has always been a problem here, because usually the cañas, or the kind of the plants or things like that, get washed down and they block up various things, and it causes the water then to go elsewhere. But they seem to have learned that lesson. I mean, I have a friend who lives in a place called Cartama, and he has a lovely finca, the Finca de Limón. It's lovely little place just outside Cartama. But it's right by a river. So I know he had a lot of problems with the recent rain, before the one of the last couple of days. But once again, the place is built close to a river, so you're kind of dicing there with a little bit. I mean, I don't know how it goes with planning permission here and things like that, but the list you had up the other day that shows places and the risk they are to flooding.
Well, it's actually incredible. I'll probably just put that on the screen here quickly so people can see. But in a city like Murcia, there was something like 30%, I don't remember the exact figures, but 30% of the homes in that municipality are at risk of flooding. So obviously,
there were some towns in Sevilla, and I think up to almost 90%. I mean, little towns of 6,000 or 8,000 people. But I think Fongarola here, you had, I think it was 7,800 houses under risk, 16%, which is about right, because probably about 20% of the town is built next to these areas which always flood.
Yeah.
Obviously, with what goes on with social media, and it's a little spillage of over from what happened in Valencia, is that people then start putting stuff up, but it doesn't reflect the whole town.
No.
I mean, we all, it was very bizarre that on Tuesday night I received a message saying that the school had been cancelled for Wednesday. And we go, so you think, okay, it's going to be bad. Let's get all the kind of stuff in. Let's kind of prepare ourselves for a lot of rain tomorrow. And I was sitting on the sofa with my family at 10 o'clock at night, and we're watching some TV show, and all our phones went off with an alarm.
Yeah.
And we all kind of looked at each other. What's going on? They said, like, the zombie apocalypse, a nuclear bomb. What's happening? And then speaking to a friend just this morning, he said he was in a restaurant, and there must have been 40 or 50 people in there, and everybody's phone went off at the same time. And he said it's like a panic.
Yeah.
And we received a message, and once again, give them credit, in English and in Spanish, a word alert for the weather the following day. So my experience here on Wednesday when we had that alert is my kids were at home.
Yeah.
And we were told between 10 and 11 we'll get hit.
Yeah.
About 11 o'clock, it rained for about 10 minutes, like end of days type rain, right? And then it just went to normal rain, right? Almost like British rain, right?
Yeah.
And then rest of the day was just kind of drizzly a bit. And then about 3 o'clock again, we had serious end of days rain. But that lasted about 5 minutes again, which was enough probably to flood various parts of the town, which had drains blocked and things like that.
Yeah.
But apart from that, that was it. I mean, that night I went out to meet some friends who are here who'd played golf, believe it or not, that day. Yeah, they said the golf course was very wet, but they actually had a game of golf in. And but everything was shut. I mean, your friend of mine, Yolanda Diaz, I believe, told people they didn't have to.
They didn't have to go to work. Yeah.
If there was a red alert, they didn't have to go to work.
Yeah.
So you can. It was like a ghost town. So we there was an Irish bar. It only seemed to be the Indian restaurants and a few breeze bars which were open on that particular night of Wednesday. But I know people have businesses and their staff didn't want to turn up for work.
Yeah.
They said they were scared for their lives.
Well, this is obviously, I don't want to say it's an overreaction because
you can't. You have to be safe. Maybe safe than sorry, maybe. But.
Well, people still have that Valencia tragedy fresh in their minds, and one of the reasons that they're putting out there now was because the alert system failed, or they didn't understand how to work it, or there's a lot of different stories.
I mean, I can't remember the woman's name, but she was claiming that she wasn't aware of that, and then she got a leaked message came out that she was aware of it, wasn't it?
Well, she was the person in charge of disasters in that area, so she didn't understand the system worked. But it's funny because we had something in Madrid last year where we got that alert system on our phones because there was one of these heavy downpours scheduled, so everybody got the alert, bing, 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 it goes off, pretty loud noise on your phone.
Yeah, it's quite shocking. Yeah?
Exactly. So there is a way to do it, but obviously she came into that position last year, so wasn't thinking. And I think a lot of the people, and obviously this will come to light further down the track, but a lot of people were probably very complacent about this as well because they, like you said, it rains for 10 minutes and then the sun comes out. So people would have been dealing with this for years and years and years, and they know what happens. Heavy rains, their garages flood, they get the water out, they go back to normal. But nobody was expecting that quantity of water to fall in that period of time.
Not in Valencia, definitely.
No. That's exactly right.
Valencia, I mean, there's obviously conspiracy theories. I imagine the truth will eventually come out. What happened there?
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's just an amount of water that wasn't possible to control in any way, shape, or form. The city of Valencia, we saw, suffered something similar back in the 50s, so they diverted the river. But this,
I remember something in 2019 happening there. And
well, it's happening all the time. It happens in Alicante, it happens in Castellón, it happens in Malaga, it happens in Murcia. But I think the people are so used to these danas or gota frias that there is a little bit of complacency. So, for example, okay, there's a red alert which was apparently shown time before, but people still went to work, people still went to school, etc. So obviously, that was.
I can think of, I would say, 100 times maybe worse weather I've experienced here than I did on Wednesday, and that's. I mean, I'm not obviously saying that areas weren't affected because that would be silly.
Yeah.
But I imagine those areas which were affected are always affected because it always happens when it rains.
Yeah. Well, again, but I think now what you're alluding to is that the alert systems were taken more seriously for this subsequent Dana because of what happened in Valencia, right? So the Andalusian government was on the ball telling people not to go to school. The Minister Diaz was telling people not to go to work if it's in red alert, all of these things.
I mean, do you think, it is very cynical to think that the Andalusian or the Junta Andalusia were trying to get one up on the Valencian community by saying, look at us, we're very prepared. And I can think of times here that it's been, I've not feared for my life, but I'm like, this is serious, right?
Yeah, again, I don't think it's, I think it's just the general consensus now that you have to take these warnings seriously because we've seen what these Danas can do, right? And when you get a tragedy in which 200 and something people die, the majority were elderly, which is also goes to show you that they were obviously because of physically they weren't able to move in time probably, or they again I don't know, that maybe in their 70 years of life have seen these things come and go over the year. I've got no idea, to be honest.
I've got no idea. I mean, it's obviously it's a tragedy. Anybody loses their life in something like this, and it's quite sad in this day and age that people still are vulnerable, especially in the Western world, to things like that. And but I know from a little bit like you following local and national politics, Valencia has always had issues. I remember 2019 there being quite some savage floods there. Obviously not to the extent that we had recently. But who's the name of the president of Valencia then? That guy with a strange name.
Masson
or something. No, before him, it was a guy, his name started with an X and it was like Puig or something.
Shima Puig.
God, look at you with your pronunciation. But I believe he'd set some things up then to account for this if it happened again. But I think it might have been cancelled by the new guy coming in. I don't know.
Again, nobody knows exactly. I think they set up an emergency. They had some type of, I heard this. They set up some type of emergency response group. But when this new guy came in, that was one of the first things that he got rid of because it was basically just he called it just a way just to give friends jobs or something. I think that was what was alluded to. But again, it doesn't really matter because the fact of the matter is that, as you said, in a supposedly strong Western European country, economically speaking, this type of thing can still wreak havoc and cause over 220 deaths. So it was. I said here they seem to have learned here, and it's not as bad as it was 10 years ago with the flooding here. And as I said, the town hall seemed to have now kind of learned their lessons. But it was ironic that a street near where I used to have my bar always flooded. No matter how many times they dug it up and replaced the pipes, it always flooded. But recently they seemed to get on top of it, and it seemed to flood, but not as bad as normal. I mean, bars on that street would have water halfway up their bar. And they closed the road this time. And I was like, for 22 years, you've never closed that road. Now you're closing it, and it was probably up to your ankles, the water. Yeah. Unfortunately, full of sewage, though. That's another byproduct of this flooding. Yeah, it's pretty nasty water. Well, absolutely, and I think that's one of the big issues that the people in Valencia are dealing with now is all of the mud and all of the sewage that gets mixed in with that, right? All of the waste and all of those things, and that just creates an enormous health risk And well, we won't.
We had a problem in our urbanisation about just before COVID, and the town hall had discovered that our waste pipes and our normal water pipes were kind of connected and all going into the same drain or sewer.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and our urbanisation was fine. Then we had to dig up the road and rectify it. So I would imagine there's quite a few buildings like that along the coast, I would think.
Well, yeah.
Hence the sewage comes up when it rains.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I don't want to be too critical, but I travel to a lot of villages, and you see that the villages have, just been put together sort of ad hoc. Some of them have grown a little bit more, and people have moved into areas where perhaps they shouldn't have moved into, and hence all of these people now saying there's 3 million homes in Spain at risk of flooding, And
that list. I mean, I was talking to my daughters and my wife about the list, and we both came to the conclusion it was about right that 16-20% of Fungirola is probably underwritten when it floods. But I grew up on the banks of the River Thames, lucky as I was, or near the River Thames. And in my little village where we grew up, nothing was built on the floodplains. And when it flooded, maybe it touched the bottom of people's gardens, but it never ever flooded anybody's house.
No.
I mean, maybe that's changed because of climate change. I don't know, but there's one house which is in particular near the floodplains there, and it was built on stilts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually there's a guy that puts videos on YouTube, and he's like an expert in this type of thing. And he said that one of his famous quotes was, "Even the Romans knew not to build in that part of Valencia." So whether
Arsenal fair.
Well, that's it. I mean, you can go back and you can sort of as somebody once pointed out, hindsight is 20/20 vision. Yeah, everyone's an expert.
I mean, people always say it doesn't rain here on the Costa del Sol, but it does rain, and every year you get a decent amount of rain, every November probably, and every February. And in between that period, you're guaranteed wet days.
Yeah.
But I said you're always going to guarantee some sort of downpour like we had on Wednesday.
Yeah.
But I'm always surprised. But it never rains. It never rains here. It rains every year. And what they tend to do, the roof will leak, and that's another problem here, though. Like the UK is not prepared for snow. I don't think the Costa del Sol is prepared for rain.
No.
And you've got my house here has a flat roof, right? And a lot of the time the drainage on that will get blocked, and it will be a swimming pool sat on top of my roof.
Yeah.
And I wonder why I get damp down my walls.
Yeah.
But you see a lot of people, it will leak, and they go, the roof's been leaking, and it will dry, and they just paint over it, and then next year the same thing will happen again.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's it all comes down to. As you said, the way the houses have been built, and also the fact that they're maybe not prepared for that torrential rainfall, which could change the way people build. Now, I just want to talk about the drought, because that was the issue 6 months ago down in Malaga, right? So we imagine that the dams are full. There's going to be no water restrictions next year.
Who knows? I mean, this year it was interesting how they approached that, and obviously there is a problem with water, but once again, it's down to infrastructure here. That they're building houses left, right, and centre, and not taking account for it. I mean, it's very similar to almost like the argument of housing for local people. There's so much more tourism, but they don't kind of allow for it. So we had it here. The showers on the beach all summer were turned off.
Oh, were they? Okay.
Well, I don't know how much that was down the whole of the Costa del Sol, but definitely here. But then you speak to people who are in the hotels, and they go, "Well, is there a water shortage? What water shortage?" And there's no notices in the hotels about where, please be careful with your water, be restricted. No, nothing. So you'd imagine these people are coming off the beach and probably showering twice as much as they normally would. So, I mean, even in the gym which I go to, which is a mixture, which is next to a hotel, so there's a lot of tourists. And there's tourists taking showers there for 15, 20 minutes, and you're like, bloody hell. And because you're local, you kind of dip it in and out, So, I don't know. You'd like to think that this water we've had here, not that we had that much in Fungirola itself, but inland, which obviously in some of these little villages got more devastated, you think hopefully some of that water's been trapped. We do have in the local newspaper here. They do give us an update on the various reservoirs and how they are, and I believe they're about 50% full. Don't quote me on that. Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. But you always did the same thing. Always the wrong type of rain, and they had to open the dam because it was overflowing. It's all, I don't know. It comes down to really overpopulation and not changing the infrastructure, in my opinion, the water shortage. So.
Well, population's one of the things, isn't it, that is, well, I don't know the world population currently, but it is one of those things that is growing and growing and growing. And,
yeah, definitely.
And obviously countries like Spain, I think I mentioned the other day when I first came here, it was only 42. Now it's 40, maybe 7 or 48, I think.
It's getting close to 50 now, isn't it?
Well, I mean, 49 maybe it was, yeah.
My daughter recently had to do a debate at school about the housing issue in Malaga for locals and against tourists and things like that. And we found a newspaper, one of the Sur in English, which is a kind of English newspaper here, which is basically translate what the Spanish one. And on the front thing,
what's the biggest newspaper in Malaga, isn't it? Sur?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but they did the Diario Sur, the Spanish version. So you had the headline was, I think, 43 areas of Malaga restricting holiday homes. Right, but right next to that, it was Ryanair increasing routes into Malaga Airport. And you're like, well, hold on a second here. And she used it in the debate because it was like, well, hold on a second, you're telling us we're going to restrict this, but at the same time, you just want the tourists. Bring them in. And the tourists are unaware of the problems here with water and the infrastructure.
Well, you don't really care though, do you?
They're on holiday.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I mean, if you're going on somewhere on holiday, if I'm planning my holiday anywhere in the world, I don't want to care whether I just want to enjoy my holiday. Should I be worried about whether there's drought restrictions? Shouldn't I be told that Malaga is drought ridden and maybe they shouldn't be accepting tourists? Or are the people telling people to go to Malaga more and more, which is what you're saying there, because Ryanair are increasing the flights?
It was something like 92 new routes or 100, and I can't exact number, around about 100, and give or take. But it was all from Northern Europe. It was mainly from the UK, Ireland, Germany. So they're all coming in, and they need to stay somewhere. And once again, where I had the bar, we had 3 major hotels near us, and all 3 of those hotels are shut for the winter. Right, they never used to shut pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right, but now they shut because they can't afford to run them because the costs have got so high with labour costs, social security costs, overheads. It's advantageous for them to do these contracts like we talked about last time. Give staff 3 months off or 4 months off, and then open again. So these tourists have to go somewhere. And you can understand. You can understand why people are upset, like there are in lots of parts of the world there isn't housing for locals and things like that. I get that completely. It's not fair, but when you've got these restrictive rules here with the kind of squatters' rights and things like that, you can understand why people look short term. They're making more money and less risk. And one thing that's not mentioned, I have a Swedish neighbour here who has a real estate and a short-term letting agency, and he said, well, 90% of the houses they have are Spanish. Right, so that's never get pointed out. It's like, well, they don't seem to care, do they, about their own people, do they? I can understand it, but we had an Akupa or a squatter in our street, and they took them at least a year and a half to get them out.
Yeah. Well, we had one here in my street as well. It took them about 5 or 6 months to get them out. But I remember the day that they did get them out. There was about 10 people. You had to have somebody from the courts here as well. You had to have somebody to change the locks. There were about 3 or 4 other people from the local council as well. You had the civil guard. You had local police. So there was 10 people standing out the front of this building, this house just up the road, to get the squatters out, and so it's not an easy thing to do.
But I mean, I feel sorry. I mean, you have to feel sorry to some of these people to a certain degree because we have an image, kind of stereotype of what a squatter looks like. I mean, imagine tattoos on their faces, and they're all drug addicts, and
anti-system.
Yeah, anti-system, but it's not always like that.
No.
It tends to be normal families sometimes.
Well, the squatters that we had in this street here, it was a family. They had 2 young kids.
Same here.
But there was a lot of activity going on which wasn't normal for the street. So there were cars pulling up at all times of the day. People that I don't want to think what they were doing was anything bad, but you sort of got the impression that it wasn't
something dodgy going on there.
It was a family, but they weren't leading a family life, if you know what I mean.
Well, I had a friend he was a teacher at a big private school up in Catalonia near Barcelona, and he had a lovely house just outside Barcelona. I can't think what the place is called, Stinges or something like that.
Sitges.
That's the one with the festival with it's got a cool festival every year, and he rented it out to someone, and he moved to Ibiza to take a job there as a teacher.
Yeah.
And then you got a phone call from one of his local neighbors. I think something's happening at your house. The police are here, right? And it wasn't a squatter, but this person had been paying his rent, and they turned his house into a marijuana farm.
Yeah, well, that happens as well. Yeah.
And that was, I mean, his house was so beautiful. He loves his doing his own work and stuff like. It made it look so beautiful, and the house had been destroyed. Holes in the wall, pipes everywhere.
Yeah. It became a grow house.
God, yeah, it's shocking stuff.
Yeah, well, that's
the guy said to him, he goes, "You got to." And the guy had his car locked in the garage when the police kind of sealed the place up. He goes, "I want my car back." Right, and the guy goes to him, "Well, I'll be a Cooper or I'll be a squatter if you don't give me my car back." You think, well, the guy's just been caught with the marijuana plants. Surely he's going to be put in a prison cell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very odd. That's a good conversation to speak to him.
That's an issue. That's an issue as well. The illegal grow houses around the country. They hook up to the electricity systems illegally, and they turn these rental properties into grow houses, as I said. And so, I mean, getting back to the point that you made, short-term rents are probably the most attractive thing, right? Because
definitely.
Otherwise you're going to be stressing out about all of these things potentially happening to you. Whereas if you've got your house, maybe you're only renting it out 3 or 4 times a month, but the people are coming through quickly. You've got the guarantee. They've already paid up front, so more or less you know what's going on. And I think probably there's less of a risk if you do have your tourists coming from the States or other parts of Europe or UK or whatever, rather than having the locals into your
these people are making the equivalent of a month's rent in a week. So from a financial point of view, as long as they're declaring and paying their taxes on it, of course, and that's another debate there.
Well, I think one of the big issues in some cities was that there's a lot of these they're illegal short-term rents set up, right? So they're not going through the council. They're just advertising on Airbnb. So there's a whole range of different things which is influencing this. But I get annoyed when foreign tourists are copping the brunt, right? So
I think you've got a place built on tourism, and tourism is obviously the pretty number one industry in Spain, give or take. And then they're kind of blaming the tourists, but they're doing everything.
Well, they seem to be blaming foreign tourists, right? So some of the ones we've seen in the Canary Islands where people are sitting on the beach, the Germans are on the beach, and people come up with one of these megaphones or whatever they're called and start saying, "This is our beach, get off our beach." Or in Mallorca, this has happened. In Barcelona, the water pistol squirting, people having dinner at 6 o'clock, But what people don't realize here is that the majority of tourism in summer is Spanish people going to a coastal resort to have their holidays, right? This in Fuengirola, it's full of Spanish people.
We have an invasion of people from the provinces of Córdoba and Seville.
Exactly.
And it's all those little villages and towns there. I mean, you got temperatures there of touching 50 degrees sometimes in July and August. So they want to get out of Dodge. And before, it was a kind of different type of tourism. And they rent a property, maybe 3 families rent a 2-bedroom place, and they just sleep wherever they could sleep and fill their basket up with a Mercadona shopping and off they go. But even that seems to have disappeared now. That kind of tourism, they can't afford to come here anymore.
Yeah.
And you even see that the chiringuitos or the beach bars here have all gone through reforms because of various laws that have been brought in to protect them still being there, and they've outpriced the locals. So they don't want. It's almost like they want. I have the rich locals, or I have the foreigner. And a certain demographic has been completely cut out of the equation.
Yeah, well, that's the way things are changing, I suppose. But a lot of the places in the Valencian community, it's all local. It's national tourism. It's people coming, as you said, from a lot of the interior villages. A lot of people coming from other towns in the Valencian community to the coast to spend their holidays. Where people have also been encouraged to buy second properties, right?
Yeah.
In places like Torrevieja or in places like Torremolinos and places like that. So.
Wasn't that the original part? Wasn't it the mayor of Alicante or something like that who went to see Franco's second in charge and begged them to open the tourism? I think there's a brilliant book called The Ghost of Spain by Charles Trimlett, I think his name is. And if I remember rightly, this mayor he jumped on his scooter and drove through the night to get to Madrid to plead with one of Franco's people to come on, this is the market we need. And before you knew it, you had loads of Scandinavians on the beaches and then.
I suppose if you look at it from an economical point of view, if you've got all of the characteristics that are going to bring people here to spend their money, which is what Malaga's got, right? It's got sunshine, the weather's good, etc. the investment that you need to put into tourism, okay, apart from building a hotel, but as you know, opening a bar, you've got a lot of graft there. You've got to do it every day, but your investment's not the same as if you're investing in, let's say, cancer research or something like that, where you've got to set up a laboratory and all of these things, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you can open a bar, but you need a certain amount of capital. But it's more accessible and an easier way to get people into jobs, I suppose. Open a bar, open a restaurant, open a chiringuito, rather than having to, put your money into, if like Jeff Bezos investing in, warehouse infrastructure or, all of these things, which the investment's huge. And the big hotels have invested, of course, but also the smaller punter as well has been able to open the beach bar, has been able to open the scooter rental place in Benidorm without the same amount of capital,
Yeah, one thing I had an observation since those dizzy days of COVID in 2020 is that the Spanish, it's not happened. I remember being in London and you couldn't really employ British people to work in the catering business because they didn't want to work those kind of jobs. Maybe at management level, yes, but nobody working behind a bar unless you're in a specialist bar. And here it's gone that way now. That majority of bars seem to have foreign workers, albeit mainly South American because of the language. And I can think of the 5 staff I had working for me during COVID when they were out on their furloughs. They were I think only one of them maybe works in this sector now. They all retrained and did something else. It's I mean, there's staff shortages, but it's filled by foreign workers now. It's a very odd. You've got more tourism. You've got lack of workers in that sector. I know that one of the models of immigration here is to go to Central and South America to bring in through the historical connections and the language, obviously. But it is interesting that the local people, the predominantly Spanish people, no longer seem to work in the bars and restaurants. Maybe they work in hotels, but
I think it's been classified as a job that locals no longer want to do for whatever reason.
Or just like in the UK, just
having to stand on your feet for too long, having to put up with irate customers or people that are perhaps not happy with the service that you're giving them. And I don't know whether it's low pay or not. I've got no idea. You obviously know.
We have, I mean, you have sectors here, and you have the sectors protected by unions and things like that, and you meant to pay them a certain amount of money, but if they get that money, it's a different matter. I mean, as you've said in our previous video, I think you're a bit of a victim if you tend to follow the law here, because they come down you and tend
Well, the funny thing is that a lot of people don't follow the law, but when the law catches up with you, they come down on you hard, and. I just got a court demand which I had to pick up. Now I sold my bar 2 months ago today, and about 3 weeks ago I had this letter to pick up, which was already out of date to pick it up by the time I got the notification. But they still had my letter there, so we went to the local courts, picked it up, and it was the music rights people, and they were charging me close to €10,000 for not having the certificates to play music, right? But they were charging me between 2020 and 2024. Now. I've never received, in principio in 2002, I got a factura or an invoice saying you have to pay this. I started paying it, but then they didn't give me the money, didn't give me the certificate, so I just forgot about it. And no one pays it. But then suddenly, randomly, I get a demand for 10 grand, which I had to pay. I had nothing, couldn't fight it. Yeah, that's a controversial body here as well. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. It starts with an S.
It's SAGE, is it Sage or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
The Jedi people are like that. Jedi as well.
They've had their issues over the years as well with corruption and things like that inside the organisation.
Well, I mean, when my lawyer investigated it, and he said you got no choice to pay this because they're protected, even though they're a bit. And that's his words, not mine. And I mean, give them credit where credit's due. They had this inspector who did like an 8-minute video of the bar in the hidden camera, right? And they took photographs of my TVs, which were showing perfectly legal football because I pay for a service which cost me a lot of money. But he whatever they do, Shazammed the songs and written everyone down on the list with the name of the artist, the album, the people who wrote it, and the year. So I had no way of fighting that.
No. Yeah,
but I think you think of the people who've left, who've been here for a year and 2 years, who've never paid that in their lives. I mean, fair enough, I've got away with a fair chunk of money.
Yeah.
But it's What are those?
Yeah, but that's like I said, a lot of people avoid it, but when it comes down, they hit hard. You know what I mean? So,
well, I originally had a squabble with them because they wouldn't give me my invoices. So I was like, "Give me my invoice," and I paid the damn thing, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Like I said, it's a controversial body, that one, the copyright and all of that type of stuff.
It's almost a metaphor for life here. That story. So.
All right, good. Now, Mark, I'm going to wrap this one up, but we'll be back in contact maybe in a couple of weeks' time, get something else up. We'll see what happens over the next few weeks here in Spain. There's always something happening.
All right, mate. Let me know what you want to do, and we can get some stuff up. And there's various things we can talk about. Yeah, I mean, that you're going to be controversial, talk about the sex industry.
Well, I'll tell you what we can do. We'll leave it to the viewers. We'll put it in the comment section what they want us to talk about, and that's what we'll do. All right, mate. We'll wrap it up.
Mate,
have a good one.
day.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.